The terminal was buzzing with the late-morning rush, rolling suitcases, loud announcements, impatient footsteps, frustrated sighs. The type of airport chaos where nobody makes eye contact, everyone is in a hurry, and stress hangs in the air like fog. Near Gate 14, a line had begun to form for boarding first class. Suits, executives, influencers, and travelers who believed their money made them better than the rest. The air smelled of expensive perfume, fresh coffee, and thick arrogance. At the very front stood a sharply dressed airline supervisor named Derek Cole, a man known for his cold eyes, clipped tone, and a habit of deciding people's worth in 3 seconds. He didn't greet passengers. He scanned them, judged them, and then either smiled or sneered depending on their clothes, watch, or attitude. His rule was simple: treat the rich with respect, treat the rest like noise. That was the morning Manny Pacquiao walked toward the gate. No entourage. No cameras. No special treatment. Just a man in a plain jacket, worn sneakers, and a cap pulled low enough to hide in the crowd. He carried only one small bag. Nothing about him shouted celebrity, legend, or global icon. To Derek, he looked like just another tired traveler, one who didn't belong anywhere near first class. Passengers stepped aside, glancing at him, confused why someone who looked so ordinary was in their line. A couple of businessmen exchanged smirks. One woman tightened her grip on her designer purse, as if the simple presence of a humble man threatened her status. Phones lifted slowly, recording discreetly. Arrogance spreads quickly in places like this. Manny didn't notice, or maybe he did and didn't care. He simply stood patiently with his boarding pass in hand, eyes calm, posture relaxed. A gentle kind of stillness that irritated Derek the moment he noticed it. Derek's eyes narrowed. He stepped forward and raised a hand sharply. "You," he said loudly, pointing at Manny's chest, "this line isn't for you." Manny blinked once, not offended, just surprised. "This is the first-class boarding area, sir. Correct?" he asked politely. Derek scoffed, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Correct. And this seat is not for people like you." A ripple of laughter spread through the line. A man whispered, "Must have wandered over from economy." Another commented, "Some people just try their luck." Someone started recording openly now. Humiliation. Captured forever. Manny shifted slightly, confused but still controlled. "I have a ticket," he said softly. "I believe there's been a misunderstanding." Derek stepped closer, invading his space, towering over him as if trying to break him with height alone. "Let me make it clear," he said through a tight smile. "First class is for premium passengers. Not for whatever you are." More laughter. A few passengers shook their heads with pity, but nobody spoke up. Nobody challenged Derek. Manny stayed still, absorbing every word without anger. His voice calm, almost too calm. "Sir, I'm just trying to board my flight." Derek snapped his fingers at 2 uniformed staff members standing nearby. "Remove him. Escort him back to economy." The staff hesitated. Something about Manny's presence felt familiar, but Derek's glare forced them forward. They gently, almost apologetically, guided Manny out of the line. People moved aside dramatically, as if he carried a disease. Phones followed him, capturing the funny moment. "That's right," Derek called out loudly, enjoying the dominance. "Next time, know your place." The moment Manny stepped out of the first-class lane, the line surged forward again, satisfied that balance had been restored. Manny didn't argue, didn't raise his voice, didn't even frown. He simply looked back at Derek with a quiet, unreadable expression, one that made a few passengers feel unexpectedly uncomfortable. And then he smiled. A small, calm, almost gentle smile. A smile that made one thing certain. Whatever Manny Pacquiao was about to do next would stun the entire airline. The morning rush at Terminal C was in full force, a chaotic orchestra of noise and motion. Rolling suitcases thumped across polished floors. Boarding announcements echoed sharply from the overhead speakers. Children cried, business travelers argued into headsets, and airport security barked instructions at confused tourists. It was the kind of environment where everyone moved fast but looked tired, stressed, and silently irritated at the world. Just beside Gate 14, a queue for first class had already formed, a line made of expensive watches, tailored suits, power heels, and people who believed their ticket entitled them not just to a seat, but to superiority. Some were impatiently tapping their feet, others pretending not to stare at anyone around them, yet secretly judging every person who dared join their line. Standing like a self-proclaimed king at the front was Derek Cole, the airline's senior boarding supervisor. His uniform was crisp, his hair carefully slicked back, and his expression permanently set to disgusted. Derek liked two things: authority and showing it off. He stood with a posture that shouted, "I'm important and you're not." He scanned passengers with a sharp, sweeping gaze that tried to classify them instantly, worth respecting or worth dismissing. He didn't smile. He didn't greet. He didn't care. His voice sliced through the air. "Next. Keep the line moving. If you're not first class, step aside." His tone was the kind that made even confident people shrink for a moment. Two junior staff members stood behind him, nervous, watching him closely, afraid to make mistakes. Derek was known for reporting staff for the smallest things. One sigh, one eye roll, one misplaced tag. He would note it, escalate it, and make someone's day miserable. And this was the scene Manny Pacquiao walked into. He came quietly, unnoticed at first, blending into the noise. Dressed in simple jeans, a plain jacket, a cap pulled low, and well-worn sneakers, Manny looked like a man who had traveled a long way and didn't care much about appearances. His bag was light, his expression peaceful. There was no security detail, no assistant pulling his suitcase, no circle of people trying to photograph him. Just Manny. Simple. Calm. Ordinary, at least to those who only see with their eyes. He approached the first-class lane with gentle steps, not forcing his way, not making a scene. A few passengers glanced at him and then looked away, confused. A couple of them frowned, wondering if he was lost or trying something foolish. Derek noticed him immediately, and his lips curled into a smirk, the kind he reserved for people he believed didn't belong. As Manny stepped closer, Derek raised a hand sharply. "Hold on there," he said loudly. "This line is for first-class passengers only." Manny nodded respectfully. "I understand," he said softly. "This is my boarding gate." Derek let out a sarcastic chuckle that carried through the entire line. "Oh, is it now? All right then, let's take a look at your ticket." He extended his hand lazily, his fingers snapping once. Manny handed over his boarding pass with both hands, a small gesture of respect that Derek ignored. He snatched the ticket roughly, eyes scanning it not with the intention to help, but with the expectation of finding something wrong. He didn't even look at Manny while reading it. Instead, he spoke loud enough for the nearby passengers to hear. "You do know the difference between first class and economy, right?" Several people chuckled under their breath. One man whispered, "This should be interesting." Another whispered, "Why do people like this even try?" Manny stood still, his posture humble. "I purchased a first-class ticket, sir," he said gently. "Maybe there's confusion." Derek exhaled dramatically, as if exhausted by Manny's existence alone. "Confusion," he repeated mockingly. "Yes, the confusion is why someone dressed like that would think they belong here." He lifted the ticket as if examining it under a microscope, shaking his head in exaggerated disbelief. "And you expect me to believe this is yours?" He tapped the boarding pass against his palm, his irritation growing. "You see that line behind you? These are premium passengers. People who fly first class regularly. People who look the part. You don't." Passengers nodded, agreeing silently. Phones began lifting again. Whispers spread like wildfire. But Manny did not react. Not one flinch. Not a flash of anger in his eyes. Just quiet patience, the kind that confused people used to dominance. "Sir," Manny said gently, "the ticket is valid." Derek swallowed a laugh. "You know what? I'll decide what's valid." He stepped aside and raised his voice to the staff behind him. "Mark this ticket for verification. And take him out of the first-class queue." One of the junior staff hesitated. He had seen Manny's face somewhere. But Derek's glare forced him to obey. As Manny stepped aside, a few passengers smirked. One woman shook her head, whispering, "Some people just don't understand their place." And in that moment, that harsh, humiliating, unprovoked moment, The contrast between the two men became painfully clear. One stood tall with arrogance. The other stood calm with humility. "Before we continue, tell me, have you ever been judged unfairly?" The tension around Gate 14 grew thicker the moment Manny Pacquiao was pulled aside. The passengers standing in the first-class queue shifted, whispering, leaning in just enough to witness the unfolding humiliation. Some held their phones up, pretending to check messages while secretly recording every second. A scene like this, a man being judged for his appearance, always drew an audience. Derek Cole, the supervisor, held Manny's boarding pass between two fingers as though it were contaminated. His expression shifted from annoyance to outright mockery. He raised his voice, making sure everyone around heard him clearly. "I'll say this one more time," Derek said, shaking his head slowly. "You don't belong in first class." A few people snickered. Someone gasped in fake shock. A couple even rolled their eyes at Manny, as if he had committed a crime by standing in the wrong line. Manny didn't change his posture. Didn't raise his voice. Didn't argue back. He simply stood with quiet dignity, eyes soft, shoulders relaxed, giving no fuel to the fire growing around him. "Sir," Manny said calmly, "I assure you my ticket is correct." Derek's eyebrows shot up. "Oh, you assure me?" He laughed, a sharp, cutting sound. "That's cute. Really cute." He stepped closer, invading Manny's privacy. "Look around," Derek hissed. "These seats cost more than your entire outfit. These people," he gestured dramatically at the line, "are paying for comfort. For exclusivity. For people who know how to behave." One of the passengers scoffed. "He should know better." Another whispered, "Security should remove him." Manny remained silent. His eyes did not flash with anger. His jaw did not clench. He simply stood still, and that calmness irritated Derek even more. Derek flicked the boarding pass once in the air, like a teacher disciplining a child. "How did you get this ticket anyway?" he mocked. "Stolen. Someone else's. Or maybe you're just trying your luck." Manny took in a slow breath. "No, sir," he said softly. "I paid for it." Derek snapped. "Oh, you paid for it? With what? Loose coins? Tips?" A ripple of laughter ran through the surrounding passengers. The humiliation hung heavy, pressed down, suffocating. A young airline clerk standing behind Derek leaned toward a colleague and whispered, "Why is he even talking to him? Just send him away." Her friend whispered back, "Maybe he thinks being polite will magically turn him into someone rich." They giggled quietly. Derek turned to the clerks. "Watch this," he said arrogantly, clearly enjoying the attention. He slammed Manny's boarding pass onto the counter. The loud smack made several passengers flinch. "This is fake," Derek declared. "Or at the very least, it was purchased by mistake. People like you book economy, not first class." He shoved the pass back toward Manny. "Step aside. Now." Manny didn't move immediately. Not out of defiance, but because he was still processing how deeply unnecessary the disrespect was. "I'm asking you politely," Manny said, still calm. "Please verify the ticket properly." Derek snatched the ticket again, this time with more force. "Oh, I'll verify it," he said. "Right now. And without hesitation. Without scanning it. Without checking the name. Without even looking twice." Derek tore the corner of the boarding pass. Gasps filled the area. Even some passengers who had been amused earlier recoiled. "Sir," one junior staff member started, alarmed. Derek raised a hand sharply to silence him. "It's invalid," Derek declared loudly. "Doesn't belong to you. Doesn't belong in this line. And frankly, you don't belong here either." A businessman in the queue muttered, "Serves him right." A woman shook her head. "Imagine thinking you could fool an airline." Someone behind them whispered, "He should be arrested." Phil. Manny did not react. No anger. No threats. No raised voice. Instead, he gently picked up the torn ticket from the counter, smoothing the edge with his thumb. His voice was soft, almost too soft for Derek's ego to tolerate. "Is this the way your airline treats passengers?" Derek scoffed loudly, waving a dismissive hand. Don't play victim here. Step aside. Go to economy. Or go home. I don't care. He turned around to address the first-class passengers. Apologies for the delay, ladies and gentlemen. Some people just don't understand boundaries. A few of them nodded approvingly. Others simply resumed, pretending they weren't watching. Derek rolled his eyes dramatically and began walking away, shaking his head as if exhausted by Manny's presence alone. And that's when Manny spoke again, quietly, but with a depth that cut through the noise. "Sir," Manny said, holding the torn ticket gently, "are you sure this is the way you treat your passengers?" The words froze several people. Even some who disliked Manny felt a tiny jolt of guilt. But Derek didn't turn back. Didn't answer. Didn't even pause. He just rolled his eyes again and walked off, leaving the entire gate area in a thick silence. A silence that would not last long, because what came next would change everything. The moment Manny stepped aside, the atmosphere around the counter shifted, just a little at first. A subtle quiet. A ripple in the noise. Most passengers didn't understand why, but their instincts nudged them. Something wasn't right. He stood there with his hands folded, eyes lowered, breathing steady. No anger. No complaint. Just stillness. And that stillness made a few travelers uncomfortable. Humble people have a way of exposing arrogance without saying a word. The rude supervisor, however, was oblivious. He strutted back to the counter like he had just won some kind of personal victory. He slapped a stack of passports on the desk and barked at the next customer, still proud of how he'd put that guy in his place. "People think they can just walk in and demand first class," he muttered loudly enough for staff to hear. "You give them a little authority, and they start dreaming they're VIPs." A few employees chuckled nervously. Not because they agreed, because they feared him. He was the kind of supervisor who loved being in charge. Loved the power. Loved reminding everyone he had it. Back at the side, Manny remained still. A middle-aged lady glanced at him, then back at the supervisor, shaking her head slightly. She couldn't understand why the man on the side looked familiar, but she wasn't confident enough to say it out loud. Near the boarding scanner, a young junior staffer froze mid-task. His eyes narrowed. His brows pulled together. He stepped closer to get a better look. "Is that?" he whispered to himself. He leaned sideways, trying to catch Manny's profile again. No, it couldn't be. What would someone like him be doing standing quietly while getting disrespected? Still, doubt lingered on the young employee's face. The airport around them carried on at full volume, rolling suitcases, beeping carts, distant announcements echoing through the terminal. But right around Manny's spot, there was a strange hush. People glanced, whispered, tried to place his face. The supervisor noticed the staring and smirked. "What? Did I do something wrong?" he asked sarcastically, raising his hands. "If someone buys a cheap ticket and pretends it's first class, I'm supposed to just let him in?" His buddies behind the counter laughed again, but the laughter was thinner now, less certain. The junior staffer finally approached another worker and whispered, "Does he look familiar to you?" The other shrugged. "Not really. Maybe some local guy." No. I think I've seen his face somewhere." "Where?" "On TikTok," the co-worker joked weakly. But the junior staffer wasn't laughing. His eyes stayed fixed on Manny, studying him carefully. The calmness. The posture. Even the hands, steady, disciplined hands. He'd seen that before. Somewhere online. Somewhere important. Meanwhile, the supervisor leaned back, stretching like a king on a throne. "Honestly," he said loudly, "I don't know why people like him even bother. Economy exists for a reason. First class is for people who earned it. Not for people who just want to feel special." Passengers nearby exchanged looks. No one agreed with him, but no one wanted to intervene. A subtle tension built in the air, like static before a storm. Manny shifted his weight, but still didn't speak. Didn't protest. Didn't even frown. Just waited. And that patience only made the staff more uneasy. A person being insulted should look upset, angry, embarrassed. But this man looked unaffected. almost like he was letting the supervisor dig his own grave. Then, a sharp crackle pierced the air. Radios. Multiple radios. Staff on the far side of the terminal suddenly straightened. 2 security officers began moving quickly, their pace urgent. A manager in a navy blazer stopped mid-conversation and touched her earpiece. Passengers noticed. Heads turned. Something was happening. The junior staffer's eyes widened. This can't be coincidence. The supervisor finally noticed the shift. "What's with all the drama?" he scoffed. "Someone lose a suitcase again?" One of the agents hurried past him, practically jogging. "Sir, stay at your station," she ordered sharply. He blinked, offended. "What's going on? Why are security rushing here?" But she didn't answer. Her eyes were scanning, searching. Another agent joined her. Then a third. Passengers shuffled back instinctively, clearing a path without being told. The air, moments earlier noisy and crowded, now felt tight. Heavy. Charged. The supervisor looked around, irritated. Why is everyone acting like there's some VIP coming through? No one responded. But the reason was becoming clearer with every passing second. Security wasn't moving toward the gates. They weren't heading toward lost luggage. They weren't escorting a celebrity or politician. They were coming here. To this counter. To this area. To this man quietly standing alone. The young staffer swallowed hard. "It is him," he whispered, realization striking like lightning. But the supervisor still didn't get it. He was too busy enjoying his own voice, too busy bragging about how he handled that rude passenger. He didn't notice that the officer's eyes weren't scanning the crowd anymore. They'd already found who they were looking for. And every passenger could feel it now. The disrespectful moment they witnessed was about to flip. Hard. Something big was about to drop. And Manny, he stood exactly where he had been, quiet, calm, unshaken, like a man who knew he didn't need to defend himself. Because the truth was already walking toward him. Fast. The atmosphere around Gate 14 had shifted completely. The usual airport chaos had slowed to a tense silence. Passengers whispered to each other, eyes darting between Manny Pacquiao and the commotion unfolding nearby. Something big was coming, and everyone could feel it in the air. Then it happened. Footsteps, sharp, hurried, purposeful, echoed against the polished floors. Radios crackled frantically, and a group of airline executives appeared, moving as one. Suits pressed tightly, badges flashing, documents clutched in hands. Their expressions were not casual. Panic flickered in their eyes. They were scanning the crowd, clearly searching for someone. "Sir," one of them called urgently into a phone, "we've got a situation at Gate 14. Confirm his location immediately." The supervisor, Derek Cole, was still smirking, unaware of the significance of what was happening. He adjusted his tie, clearly believing the spotlight was still on him. But then, one executive's gaze landed on Manny. It was instantaneous. Recognition struck like a lightning bolt. Eyes widened. Mouths parted. The panic in their posture turned into action. They rushed forward, papers fluttering, phones forgotten. "Sir, Mr. Pacquiao?" One of the executives asked breathlessly, almost tripping over a rolling suitcase in the rush. Manny glanced up calmly, tilting his head slightly, his expression unchanged. No anger. No ego. Just a quiet confidence that seemed to fill the space around him. The supervisor froze. His smirk vanished. Color drained from his face. He stared, jaw slack, at the approaching executives. "Apologies, sir. We didn't know," he stuttered, panic rising in his voice. The executives didn't even glance at him. They were focused entirely on Manny. "Sir," one of them said urgently, bowing slightly, "we've been expecting you." Manny's lips curled into a faint, knowing smile. "Calm. Patient. Controlled. We never imagined someone would treat you like this," another executive added, voice tight with both anger and embarrassment. Passengers gasped audibly, some nearly dropping their phones. Whispers turned to murmurs. Conversations stopped. The realization spread like wildfire. The man who had been publicly humiliated was not just any passenger. He was Manny Pacquiao. Legendary boxer. International icon. Someone whose name alone commanded respect. Wow, wait! Derek finally found his voice, trembling. Mr. Pacquiao? You mean you are? The color in his cheeks drained further. His confident posture crumpled. The authority he had wielded so easily just moments ago evaporated in the face of the truth. I didn't realize, he stammered, eyes dotting nervously. Sir. Manny didn't interrupt. He didn't shout. He didn't make a scene. He simply looked at Derek, unflinching, eyes calm, steady, almost gentle. There was no anger in them. Just quiet judgment. Enough to make Derek understand that the mistake had consequences, even without yelling or threats. Passengers began whispering amongst themselves, the tension breaking slightly, replaced with awe and disbelief. Some were shaking their heads. Others laughed nervously, realizing they had just witnessed the ultimate reversal. One of the executives stepped closer to Manny, lowering his voice. Sir, please allow us to make amends. You should be in first class, as you booked. Anything you need, we'll ensure it is done immediately. Manny inclined his head slightly. Still calm. Still composed. He didn't shout or demand. He didn't act like a celebrity. But his presence alone filled the room with authority. The supervisor finally found his voice again, weaker now, panicked. I swear I didn't know. I thought you were, I assumed you were. Manny's eyes met his. Quiet, unwavering, and still no anger. Just the simple weight of expectation. Passengers murmured in shock. Some whispered, "Did you see that?" Others said, "That's Manny Pacquiao." Phones raised again, capturing the stunned reactions. The man who had been publicly humiliated had become the person who controlled the room without moving a muscle. One executive stepped between Manny and the supervisor. "Sir," he said, voice firm but respectful, "we've taken note of the situation. Rest assured, proper measures will be taken." Manny nodded once, a subtle gesture that felt heavier than any speech. The young junior staffer who had recognized him earlier finally whispered under his breath, That's why he never reacted. He knew exactly who he was. And he knew the lesson would teach itself." Derek slumped back slightly, unable to meet anyone's gaze. The smirk, the arrogance, the false confidence, all gone. And as Manny calmly prepared to be escorted to his rightful seat in first class, a question lingered in the minds of everyone who witnessed it. What would you do? Fire him, or forgive him? Because in that moment, the balance of power had shifted completely. The humiliation, the arrogance, the misplaced superiority, all had been exposed. And Manny, he didn't need to yell. He didn't need to fight. He simply let the truth reveal itself. And that quiet, patient dignity, more powerful than any argument, left a mark on everyone in the terminal that no one would forget. The tension that had gripped Gate 14 moments ago now hung in a different form, heavy, uncomfortable, and electric. Derek Cole, the airline supervisor who had strutted with arrogance just minutes earlier, stood frozen. His eyes darted between Manny Pacquiao and the executives, his ego crumpled under the weight of realization. I'm so sorry, sir, Derek stammered, voice trembling. I didn't know. I had no idea who you were. I swear I meant no disrespect. He took a step forward, then another, his hands raised slightly, pleading. A bead of sweat ran down his temple. His confident posture had vanished, replaced by nervous stiffness. Every person in the terminal, from passengers to junior staff, could see that he was genuinely shaken. For the first time, he was confronted by the consequences of his arrogance. Manny Pacquiao didn't raise his voice. He didn't yell. He didn't lash out. He simply looked at Derek with quiet calm, letting his presence speak louder than any words could. "Respect," Manny said softly, almost gently, yet every ear in the terminal seemed to hear it, "shouldn't depend on who someone is. Not on fame. Not on money. Not on looks. Respect is for everyone." The words landed like a soft but heavy hammer. Derek's shoulders slumped. His eyes, once sharp and full of pride, now reflected embarrassment and shame. He opened his mouth, but no words came. He had been schooled without a fight, without public anger, by a man who carried himself with dignity. Manny then shifted his gaze to the junior staff member who had recognized him earlier, a young clerk standing near the side, hesitant but respectful. He had stayed calm, had followed protocol, and had shown the kind of humility that few ever notice. Manny gave a subtle nod. "You," he said, "come with me. Escort me to my seat." The junior staffer's eyes widened in disbelief. His knees felt weak, but he nodded immediately, moving forward. A mixture of pride and nervous excitement ran through him. He could hardly believe that he was now part of correcting the wrong that had just taken place. Executives flanked Manny on both sides, walking briskly toward first class. Their expressions were a mix of reverence and urgency. Papers were forgotten. Phones were ignored. Their focus was entirely on making sure this legendary guest received the treatment he deserved. Passengers in the terminal watched in silence, heads turning, whispers spreading like wildfire. Some were stunned by what had happened. Some were recording quietly, documenting the entire scene. Every eye followed Manny's calm stride, the dignified figure who had turned humiliation into a lesson. Derek, meanwhile, remained behind. He didn't follow. He didn't dare. Standing there, he finally understood the gravity of his own arrogance. The smirk that had adorned his face was gone. He felt the weight of every eye on him, every judgment passed silently. He had tried to wield power over someone he thought was ordinary, only to find himself powerless before truth and humility. One of the executives placed a polite hand on Derek's shoulder. "It's clear this was a misunderstanding," the executive said softly. "But we hope this serves as a lesson. Respect your passengers. Always." Derek swallowed hard. He nodded, unable to speak. Words would not fix the lesson he had just received. Meanwhile, Manny, escorted by the junior staffer and executives, moved through the terminal. Passengers parted instinctively, a mix of awe and admiration in their expressions. No cameras were needed to amplify his presence. His calm authority did that naturally. The simple act of walking to his seat had become a display of dignity and leadership. "Follow me," Manny said quietly to the junior clerk. The clerk nodded, careful to match his pace. Manny didn't hurry, didn't flaunt his fame, and yet every step commanded attention. As they reached the first-class cabin, the executives opened the doors and ensured his seat was ready. Blankets, refreshments, and a polite nod from the lead flight attendant awaited him. Everything was in order, every detail prepared, every protocol meticulously followed. Passengers glanced through the cabin doors, heads shaking in disbelief. They had just witnessed an extraordinary display, a man publicly humiliated, yet responding with unparalleled calm, patience, and dignity. The lesson had been taught without violence, without shouting, without revenge. Derek remained in the terminal, standing silently. He could see Manny being escorted to his seat, could see the admiration and respect flowing toward him from everyone around. And in that moment, Derek understood something profound. Authority is not measured by how loudly you can command, but by how quietly you can earn respect. Manny lowered himself into the seat, adjusting slightly, still calm, still composed. The junior clerk handed him a bottle of water, and Manny offered a small, subtle nod of appreciation. No fanfare. No ego. Just dignity. Passengers murmured softly, the silence of the terminal now replaced by awe. Whispers floated through the air. "Did you see that? He handled it perfectly. That's class." And Derek, standing alone, realized the lesson he would never forget. Arrogance can crumble in seconds. Humility, patience, and quiet confidence carry far more power than shouting, belittling, or abusing authority ever could. The terminal slowly returned to normal, the noise creeping back, announcements echoing, but the memory of what had just unfolded would linger for a long time. Every person who witnessed it had learned something, whether they realized it or not. Manny leaned back, relaxed, calm. His presence alone had turned humiliation into a lesson, arrogance into understanding, and disrespect into reflection. Leadership, wisdom, and humility, without revenge, had spoken louder than any punishment ever could. And in that moment, Derek understood fully. The lesson had been delivered, perfectly and silently. The airport terminal slowly returned to its usual rhythm, the chaos of rolling suitcases, barking announcements, and impatient footsteps creeping back into the background. Yet, for those who had witnessed the events at Gate 14, nothing could ever feel quite normal again. Something had shifted, not the schedules, not the boarding lines, but the way people saw respect, humility, and power. Manny Pacquiao had taken what could have been an embarrassing, humiliating moment and transformed it into a lesson that resonated far beyond the airport walls. He hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't yelled, demanded, or retaliated. He had simply been himself, calm, composed, and quietly confident. And that alone had spoken volumes. For the passengers who had watched, the lesson was undeniable. The man who looked ordinary, who dressed simply, who had been pushed aside and mocked, had turned the tables without a single word of aggression. Appearances, they realized, could be deceiving. To judge someone by the clothes they wore, the way they walked, or the first impression they gave was to risk missing the truth entirely. Even Derek Cole, the supervisor who had strutted with arrogance and certainty just minutes before, had learned this firsthand. His lesson was hard, immediate, and unforgettable. True power isn't in belittling others. True authority doesn't come from fear or loud commands. True respect is earned, not assumed. Passengers whispered among themselves. A few shook their heads in disbelief. A woman adjusted her scarf, her eyes lingering on the first-class cabin doors as if trying to absorb the quiet dignity she had witnessed. A young man murmured, "I can't believe he didn't react. I would have lost it." But Manny had shown that reacting out of ego, out of anger, only diminishes a person. Calmness, patience, and humility carry far more weight than any display of power ever could. The lesson was subtle but unmistakable. Greatness is quiet, respectful, and measured. It does not need to announce itself. It simply is. Respect, Manny had demonstrated, is not a privilege reserved for the rich, the famous, or the powerful. It is a right that belongs to everyone. Every human being, regardless of appearance, wealth, or status, deserves to be treated with dignity. And when someone chooses to ignore that, the lesson of respect is often far more impactful than anger or punishment ever could be. For the airline staff, the lesson lingered in a tangible way. The junior clerk who had remained calm and respectful found himself receiving a subtle nod of approval from Manny, a quiet acknowledgement that courage and humility were noticed, even in small acts. He felt a sense of pride, not in being rewarded, but in having upheld the right values at the right moment. And for the passengers who had recorded, whispered, or silently watched, the memory of the event would stay with them for years. It wasn't just a viral moment. It was a reminder that appearances deceive, arrogance backfires, and quiet strength always commands attention. Even Derek Cole, standing back near the counter, realized that this was a turning point. He had wielded his authority carelessly, misjudged a man based on a first impression, and faced immediate consequences, not through punishment, but through the silent demonstration of integrity and patience. It was humbling. It was eye-opening. And it was a lesson he would never forget. In the end, Manny walked to his seat, accompanied by the executives and the junior clerk who had shown respect. No fanfare. No flashing cameras. Just dignity. The first-class cabin had been prepared perfectly, and yet the true power was not in the luxury around him. It was in his calm, unshakable presence. He had made a point far larger than the seat he occupied or the money he had spent. And that is the ultimate takeaway for everyone watching. Humility is strength. Patience is power. Respect is a language everyone understands. The moments that seem ordinary, waiting in a line, being underestimated, being mocked, can turn into lessons that resonate far beyond the immediate scene. It's how you respond, not how others behave, that defines character. So, for everyone reading this, take a moment to reflect. When was the last time you judged someone by their appearance? When did you assume a person's worth based on superficial details? Manny's quiet response reminds us all that true greatness lies in humility, patience, and calm dignity. And now it's your turn to reflect. If you believe respect is real strength, type respect in the comments. And while you're at it, let us know. Where are you watching from? Because every act of humility, patience, or dignity, no matter how small, is seen, noticed, and remembered. And the people who witness it carry that lesson forward, quietly but powerfully. Manny Pacquiao left the terminal not with applause, not with shouts, but with the kind of presence that leaves a lasting mark on everyone who sees it. A reminder that true strength is measured not by fear, not by wealth, not by appearances, but by the ability to remain composed, respectful, and dignified, no matter the provocation. And that lesson is one the entire airport, every passenger, every staff member, and yes, even the arrogant supervisor, would carry forever. If you want, I can compile parts 1 to 7 into a complete single script ready to use for storytelling or video.